It happened well after midnight. Outside, the East Prussian forest around the wolf's lair was black and dripping with autumn rain. Inside Hitler's map room, the air was bright, dry, and stale with cigarette smoke and exhaustion. He was talking, as he always did. Pacing along the wall map, uniform tunic unbuttoned at the neck, one trembling hand gripping a wooden pointer. Red arrows for Soviet thrusts, blue for German counterattacks that existed mostly in his imagination. He railed about traitors in the general staff, cowards and the Luftwaffe saboteurs in the factories. He spoke of miracle weapons that would soon turn everything around. Keitel stood rigid, expression fixed. Jodl pretended to take notes. Albert Speer watched Hitler's hands. The tremor in the left one had become more pronounced. In the doorway, General Karl Koller, the Luftwaffe's chief of operations, waited with a thin brown folder pressed against his chest. He had been waiting for a pause in the monologue. It didn't come. Finally, Koller cleared his throat. "Am I Farah?" he began carefully. "There's an intelligence report you requested from our liaison in Tokyo. Photographs of a new American bomber that has appeared over Japan." Hitler snapped the pointer against the map. "I know all about their bombers," he snapped. "Oberzo, a flying fortresses, liberators, cowardly attacks on women and children. I do not need more excuses from the Luftwaffe." Koller didn't move. "This is something different. They call it the B-29. Our Japanese friends say it can bomb their home islands from bases thousands of kilometers away and return." The word of photographs and the mention of Japan finally cut through. Hitler hesitated. His voice faltered. He turned from the wall map toward the table in the center of the room. Koller crossed the floor, laid the photographs out on the green felt, black and white images, slightly grainy. A long concrete runway, tiny ground crew figures clustered around something that dominated the frame. A huge, smooth-bellied aircraft with 4 engines and a high, slender tail. Its nose was entirely glazed. The wings seemed to stretch on forever. It was not a B-17, not a B-24, not anything the Luftwaffe recognition manuals had prepared them for. Hitler pulled a pair of spectacles from his pocket, set them on his nose, and bent close. For once, he did not speak. Koller took a breath. "The B-29 Superfortress," he said softly, "a wingspan 43 meters, service ceiling over 9,000 meters, range more than 5,000 kilometers with a bomb load, cruising high above most known fighters. We estimate a bomb load of up to 9 tons. He tapped one photograph where a row of the giants stood side by side. "These are on Saipan, my Führer. The first raids on Japan have already taken place. Our attaché in Tokyo reports that entire districts have burned from single attacks." Hitler stared at the photos longer than anyone present had seen him consider anything in months. Then he asked a single question. How far could they fly? If based in England, the room held its breath. Koller knew the answer. The Americans did not need B-29s over Germany. Their older bombers were already enough. But in theory, anywhere in the Reich, "My Führer," Koller said, "and far beyond, they would have fuel to spare." In the corner, a clock ticked past 1 in the morning. For the first time that night, perhaps for the first time in years, Hitler did not respond with a rant. No accusations, no promises of revenge. No talk of a secret weapon that would sweep all of this away. According to Speer, who would later write about nights like this, he simply straightened, removed his glasses, and said nothing at all. To understand why a few blurred photographs could silence a man who had shouted his way through disasters like Stalingrad and Kursk, we have to go back to the beginning of his faith in air power and his contempt for America. In 1939 and 1940, the Luftwaffe had been the cutting edge of German victory. Stukas screamed down on Polish columns and French forts. Medium bombers blasted Rotterdam and London. For Hitler, this seemed to prove what he had always believed, that terror from the air could break an enemy's will long before their industry could fully mobilize. He also believed something else, that the United States could never be a serious air power. In private conversations, he dismissed American industry as crude and undisciplined, run by Jews and Negroes, as he put it, incapable of sustaining a modern war. American youth, he insisted, were soft, spoiled, addicted to comfort. They would never endure years of sacrifice. By 1943, reality had begun dismantling that fantasy. American B-17s and B-24s, escorted first by P-47s and then by long-range P-51 Mustangs, were appearing over German cities almost daily. The RAF hit at night, the Americans by day. Hamburg burned in July 1943. Roughly 37,000 civilians died there in a single week. The Ruhr followed, then Berlin, then the oil refineries that kept German tanks and aircraft moving. In 1943, American factories produced about 86,000 military aircraft. German factories, under bombing and starved of raw materials, produced around 26,000. In 1944, the American total would climb above 96,000. German production rose briefly, then faltered as bombs and losses took their toll. Luftwaffe generals like Galland warned that they were losing control of the skies. Fighter units were being shredded. In a big week, February 1944, the U.S. 8th Air Force and RAF Bomber Command lost around 500 aircraft attacking German aircraft factories. The Luftwaffe lost something far more irreplaceable: hundreds of veteran pilots. Hitler refused to accept what those numbers meant. He shifted his hope to a Wunderwaffen, miracle weapons, the Me-262 jet, the V-1 flying bomb, the V-2 rocket. He told Speer that once these came into full production, the bombing of Germany would stop, England would collapse, and America would have no reason to continue. The jets needed fuel that no longer existed in sufficient quantity. The rockets consumed as much industrial effort as an entire armored division and delivered 1 ton of explosive at a time without accuracy. Meanwhile, each B-17 or B-24 could carry multiple tons accurately and come back to do it again. And yet, even as bunker ceilings shook with the impact of Allied bombs, Hitler kept talking. He blamed Goering. He blamed the cowards in fighter command. He blamed a sabotage by foreign laborers. Anything but the simple reality that in a war of factories and fuel, the Reich was being drowned by numbers it could never match. The B-29 photographs were something different. They did not represent a new threat to Germany itself. The Americans would never need to send them over the Reich. They were already destroying German cities with what Hitler considered older models. What those images showed was something far more devastating to his worldview: American surplus. Even as the United States built tens of thousands of aircraft for Europe, it had invested another $3 billion into developing an entirely new class of bombers specifically for the Pacific. A machine with a pressurized cabin, remote-controlled gun turrets, enormous range. His generals were stunned. Germany and America were already engaged in an undeclared naval war in the Atlantic, but a formal declaration freed Roosevelt to mobilize everything against Germany, as well as Japan. Hitler had believed that American industry was decadent, American society divided, American willpower weak. He had expected a short, half-hearted effort, not a total war. American soldiers were in France approaching the German border. American bombers were turning German cities into moonscapes. And now, American B-29s were taking off from islands in the Pacific to attack Japan, while American shipyards still launched new carriers and battleships at a pace German planners considered impossible. The B-29s were proof that, even with everything America had thrown into Europe, there was still more. Speer would later recall moments like this when he tried to show Hitler a simple chart: German aircraft production versus Allied, German fuel stocks versus Allied. Hitler would glance at the numbers, then push the paper away, preferring to talk about the next offensive, the next miracle weapon. But photographs were harder to ignore. He asked Collar again, more quietly this time, whether such machines could fly from England to the Urals and back. Collar said yes, from Iceland to Berlin, from Greenland to Vienna. Of course, he added, they don't need to. Their older bombers are enough for us. That more than any range figure hung in the air. In the bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery months later, Hitler would blame everyone but himself for defeat. The Jews, the generals, the German people for being too weak. He would speak of betrayal and treason and fate. But in that night, at the Wolf's Lair over those photos, something else pressed itself into his mind. The scale of a continent-sized opponent he had spent a decade dismissing. The silence did not last long. The next day, the rants resumed. Orders went out. Boys were conscripted. The war ground on, killing hundreds of thousands more on every front. The photographs went into a file. In the end, the night Hitler was shown the first B-29 photos did not change the Allied bombing campaign. It did not hasten surrender. It did not save a single life. What it did, for a brief, unguarded moment, was force a man who had built his world on words, on speeches, on promises, on threats, to confront a truth for which he had no language. That in a war decided by production lines and runways, by tons of aluminum and barrels of aviation fuel, the Reich had never really stood a chance. And for once, faced with the flying proof of that fact, Adolf Hitler finally stopped talking.